Have you ever had that persistent, silent feeling that you're wasting your life? No matter how hard you try to keep yourself busy, surrounded by people, goals, obligations, deep down, something essential is missing, as if you're merely existing, not truly living. Here's what most people don't realize. Carl Jung, one of the greatest depth psychologists who ever lived, discovered that this feeling isn't weakness, it's not depression that needs to be medicated away. It's your psyche screaming that the life you're living does not serve your soul. And here's the brutal part. Everything designed to help you, the therapy, the medication, the productivity systems, might be silencing the very voice you need to hear. The voice that knows you're betraying yourself every single day. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what Jung discovered about why so many people feel like they're dying inside. Why modern psychiatry doesn't want you to understand the real cause, and the one decision you must make if you ever want to stop wasting your existence pretending everything is fine. Because what you're about to hear isn't comfort, it's confrontation. And if you're still here, that's exactly what you need. Perhaps you have tried to explain this as anxiety. Maybe a doctor has called it depression, and perhaps they prescribed something to silence that discomfort. A pill in the morning, another at night. And time goes by, numbing what you should be urgently listening to. But what if I told you that this suffering is not a mistake? What if I told you that it is not something to be suppressed, but rather a calling? Carl Jung believed that what we call mental disorder is often not a pathology. It is an attempt by the psyche to heal itself, a warning that your life as it is does not serve your soul. You may be living a routine that was imposed on you, a job that consumes you, relationships that drain your energy, dreams that aren't even yours. Meanwhile, your essence screams for freedom, but no one taught you to listen to that scream. On the contrary, they taught you to silence it, to function, to adapt, to not disturb, and so you become ill in silence, while the world applauds your productivity. This is where Jung comes in. For him, healing does not come from denial, but from diving in. It is not about masking the symptoms, but understanding what they are trying to say. Because in Jung's own words, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, you are sick because you are running away from the pain you need to feel to transform your life. As long as you keep running, you will keep suffering. This video is not for those who want distraction. It is for those who are tired of pretending, for those who feel they are sinking but still hold a spark of hope that there is a way, and there is. But it starts with a brutal decision to stop running and start listening. Listening to yourself, listening to the unconscious, listening to the pain you tried to silence with medication, with addictions, with routines. If you have made it this far, you may have already realized that emptiness you feel is not weakness. It is the absence of yourself in your own life, and it is time to change that. You have been feeling sad for days, weeks, maybe months. You go to the doctor. He listens to you for 15 minutes, if he listens at all. You talk about insomnia, anxiety, the tightness in your chest that appears for no reason, about the constant feeling of being out of place, disconnected from your own existence. He nods, types a few words on the computer, and then comes the verdict: it's anxiety. Let's start with this medication. Done. In a few days or weeks, your pain has been reduced to a chemical imbalance. And what was an existential cry becomes a number on a prescription label. Jung believed that most modern neuroses do not arise from an internal failure of the brain, but from the disconnection between the life we lead and the life we should be living. When you ignore your vocation, your most authentic impulses, your inner truths, the soul begins to sicken. And since it has no literal voice, it speaks through the body and mind. Anxiety, panic attacks, hopelessness. But instead of listening to it, we are trained to silence it, to neutralize any discomfort with chemicals, to return to normal as quickly as possible. But what is this normal? A job you hate but can't quit. Superficial relationships that serve to maintain appearances, empty goals, mechanical routines, and a constant feeling that you are surviving instead of living. The anxiety you feel is not a failure. It is your soul telling you, this life is not yours, you are betraying me. And if you ignore this for too long, the body starts to scream louder. But the system is always ready with a new dose, a new label, a new sedative, and the more you adapt to this model, the further you distance yourself from yourself, until you feel nothing anymore, neither pain nor pleasure. Just this chronic numbness they call adult life. Carl Jung warned that by medicating the symptom without understanding its root, we create an illusion of healing. The person improves on the outside, but inside remains lost. And in the long run, this division between what is felt and what is lived generates an even greater collapse because there is no way to escape the soul forever. It will demand its price, whether in the form of burnout, emotional collapses, or through an emptiness that nothing, absolutely nothing, can fill. This mass medicalization is a reflection of something deeper, a culture that does not know how to deal with suffering, that fears pain because it has lost the sense of its transformative value. For Jung, suffering was necessary. It was the beginning of the journey. It was the call to individuation. But in modern society, any discomfort is labeled as pathological. And by fleeing from suffering, we also flee from the chance to become who we should be. Before we go deeper, I need to tell you something that will make you uncomfortable. Everything I've just described, the medicalization, the cultural conditioning, the systematic silencing of your soul, it's not accidental. It's not some bureaucratic failure of the healthcare system. It's working exactly as designed, because a person who understands their pain is dangerous. A person who refuses to be medicated into compliance is uncontrollable, and a person who starts asking, "Why am I living this life?" stops being a good consumer, an obedient employee, a predictable citizen. Jung knew this. That's why his work was buried. That's why you've never heard these ideas in any mainstream therapy session. And that's exactly why what comes next, his process of individuation, is the most threatening concept to a system that needs you numb. But if you're still watching, you're already different. So let me show you what they don't want you to know. I know what you're thinking right now. This all makes sense, but how do I actually do this? How do I start confronting my unconscious? How do I stop living someone else's life when I don't even know what my life looks like? That's the question Jung spent his entire life answering. And the answer isn't simple. It isn't comfortable. But it starts with understanding the prison you're in, the cultural forces that shaped you into someone you're not. Let me show you what Jung himself said most people can't handle. Have you ever wondered why so many people are suffering emotionally, even surrounded by material comfort, technology, and supposed freedoms? We have never had such access to information, entertainment, and stimuli. And at the same time, we have never been so disconnected from ourselves. The root of modern psychological suffering is not only within the mind, it is in the environment that shapes us from birth. Carl Jung understood this with brutal clarity. For him, the problem was not just individual, it was cultural, it was structural. We live in a society that glorifies appearance but neglects essence, that rewards efficiency but ignores the soul. From an early age, we're shaped to follow a script, study, choose a safe career, be productive, consume, hide vulnerability. At 18, they asked, "What do you want to study?" But really, they were asking, "Which acceptable box will you climb into for 40 years?" And you picked one. Not because it called to you, but because it wouldn't disappoint anyone. No one teaches us to ask what makes life worth living, and that's not accidental, it's programmed. We're conditioned to believe identity comes from outside, the title, the salary, the approval, but Jung knew this is a fatal trap. When your value depends on external standards, you distance yourself from your unconscious, from your soul. And that's where the emptiness begins. You know that feeling when you're scrolling Instagram at 2 a.m., feeling empty but unable to stop. That's not addiction, that's your soul screaming that this life isn't yours. Jung called this the psyche's attempt to wake you up, but instead of listening, you medicate it, distract from it, numb it. It takes over your routine. You meet all the expectations, check off all the items on the list, but still feel out of place. You feel like you are living someone else's life, that something is wrong, but you can't explain what. What you are feeling is not weakness, it is disconnection. Disconnection from what is true, spontaneous, instinctive, and this disconnection, according to Jung, is what fuels the deepest psychological disturbances. But society does not want you to realize this because disconnected people are easier to control. They consume more, question less, follow orders without resistance. They are useful, they are docile, they are predictable. And when they finally collapse, when anxiety, depression, or burnout hit them hard, the system responds with palliatives. Never with the truth. Jung said that to heal, the individual needs to confront the world that hurt them. They need to understand how they were conditioned, what was repressed, what was sacrificed in the name of acceptance, and this is a painful task, because it involves admitting that you lived a life that was not yours, that you shaped yourself to fit into a mold that suffocated you, that you were domesticated by a culture that fears the human soul. But it is also the only way out, because only by recognizing the origin of your emptiness can you begin the journey to fill it with truth, and this journey has a name: individuation. There comes a moment in life when pain can no longer be ignored, when the social mask begins to weigh too heavily, when you realize you are living as if you are only half, or worse, a caricature of who you truly are. It is at this breaking point that, according to Carl Jung, the most important journey a human being can undertake begins: the journey of individuation. But what does it really mean to individuate? Jung was not talking about cheap self-help or small habit changes. He referred to a deep, almost mythical process in which the individual ceases to be a reflection of the external world, of family, culture, others' expectations, and begins to become what they are in essence. Individuation is the path to psychic wholeness. It is when you stop being what others expect of you and start becoming what your soul is asking for. And this process is not linear nor comfortable. Quite the opposite. It requires you to confront everything that has been repressed, ignored, or denied within yourself. What Jung called the personal unconscious reveals itself at this point. Unresolved traumas, suffocated desires, inherited beliefs that have never been questioned. Individuation begins when you decide to stop fleeing from these parts and start integrating them. But that is just the beginning, because the most challenging step of individuation, and perhaps the most painful, is the encounter with the shadow. That dark, instinctive, animalistic, and chaotic side that you have learned to hide. You pride yourself on being nice. But notice that secret satisfaction when your successful friend fails? That's your shadow, the competitive, aggressive part you buried to be loved. And now it controls you through passive aggression, self-sabotage, resentment you can't explain, the anger you never expressed, the envy you pretend not to feel, the impulses that shame you. Your shadow isn't just repressed anger, it's the ambition you call selfish, the boundaries you call mean, the power you call arrogant. Everything you were taught to hate about yourself is exactly what you need to reclaim. Here's another one. You've been in therapy for 3 years talking about your childhood, but you still choose the same toxic partners, still sabotage yourself at the same point, still feel the same emptiness. That's because talk therapy treats symptoms. Jung treated the soul. Jung said, "Those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken." And looking inside means facing your shadow without masks, without excuses, without moralism. Why is this so important? Because the shadow, if ignored, controls you without you realizing it. But if integrated, it becomes a source of power, of authenticity, of vital energy. It is only possible to live a true life when you stop fighting against yourself and start reconciling with everything that inhabits you. Individuation is that. the reconstruction of inner unity. The reconnection with the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the living wholeness that you are in potential. And here lies the great irony. While the world says you need to improve, Jung said you need to become whole, no longer perfect, but real, no longer fitting, but free. Here's what Jung discovered that most psychologists refuse to acknowledge. Your unconscious isn't some dark basement full of repressed traumas that need to be processed in therapy sessions. It's an entire universe, vast, symbolic, alive, that holds every part of you that was too honest, too raw, too real for the world to accept. And here's the part that changes everything. The unconscious doesn't speak in words. It doesn't respond to logic or positive affirmations or cognitive behavioral techniques. It speaks in dreams, in inexplicable emotional reactions, in patterns you keep repeating without knowing why. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. Beneath your personal traumas lies something deeper. The collective unconscious ancient patterns. Archetypal forces. The same psychological structures that drove your ancestors are driving you right now. The persona, your social mask. The part of you that smiles at work while dying inside. The anima, or animus, the contrasexual energy you project onto partners, making them responsible for your completeness, the self. The regulating center trying to guide you back to wholeness. These aren't just concepts. They're living forces operating in your psyche right now, whether you acknowledge them or not. Most people spend their entire lives running from these signals. They medicate the anxiety. They distract themselves from the dreams. They ignore the patterns, and then they wonder why nothing ever changes. But you're not most people. If you were, you would have clicked away 10 minutes ago. So let me show you what happens when you finally stop running. The healing you seek is not in fitting better into the world, but in aligning your inner world with the truth of your being. This process can be lonely. It can be arduous, but it is also the only one that offers real meaning to existence. Because when you start living from your center, everything changes. Your choices change, your relationships change, your way of suffering changes. Suffering ceases to be a punishment and becomes part of a deeper transformation. But here arises an inevitable question. Why do so many people live distant from this journey? Why do so many remain anesthetized, repeating patterns, avoiding confrontation with their own soul? The answer lies in the root of modern suffering, the absence of meaning. Stop and look around you. How many people do you know who seem to be merely existing, not living? How many follow an automatic routine, marked by empty commitments, superficial distractions, and a fatigue that no amount of sleep can resolve? Carl Jung knew that this type of suffering was not casual. It was structural. It was existential. According to him, much of the psychological suffering of modern humans comes from a single and brutal realization. Life has lost its meaning, and we are not talking about meaning as a grand cosmic mission or an unattainable utopia. We are talking about personal purpose, about alignment between what one does and who one is. About living according to an internal truth and not under the external demands of a world that idolizes success but kills the soul. Jung observed in his patients that the deepest symptoms, anxiety, depression, apathy, anguish, often disappeared when the individual began to build a meaningful life. Not when they took medication, not when they made money, but when they found a why. Because deep down, you can endure almost any pain if you know why you are living. But without that meaning, even the most intense pleasures become mundane. Even the most ambitious goals sound empty. And that is exactly what we are experiencing today, an epidemic of emptiness. You work 60 hours a week for a promotion you don't even want. You buy things you don't need to impress people you don't like. You post vacation photos while your marriage collapses. You achieve every goal your parents set for you and feel nothing. That's not burnout. That's your soul dying of starvation while your resume looks impressive. People tired not just from an excess of tasks, but from a lack of purpose, lives full of commitments, but poor in direction. Jung understood that humans need to feel part of something greater than themselves. They need to feel that their existence has weight, consequence, and meaning. Without this, they collapse internally. Suffering turns into disorientation. The soul cries out for a path, but all the world offers are distractions. Likes, series, self-help promises, productivity techniques, miraculous courses, all trying to fill a void that can only be filled with truth. And the truth is that many are living a life they did not choose. They were pushed into paths that please others but betray them internally. They chose professions that have no connection to their values. They maintain relationships that weaken them. They inhabit cities that suffocate them. They repeat routines that erase them day after day. And the body feels it. The mind collapses. The soul contracts. There is no remedy for the absence of meaning, because what is missing is not serotonin. It is direction. It is not dopamine. It is identity. And this is where Jung's deep psychology becomes urgent, because he did not simply want people to function. He wanted them to live authentically, to have the courage to say, "This life is not mine, and I refuse to continue like this." Now here's where this gets dangerous. Jung shows you the cage. He reveals how you've been conditioned, how the unconscious controls you, how your life isn't yours. But he stops there. He tells you to individuate, to integrate, to become whole. But Machiavelli, he teaches you to pick the lock, because understanding your shadow is step one. Using it strategically, that's power. While others are trapped in the same unconscious patterns, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, playing by rules that weren't designed for them, you'll understand the game being played. You'll see the manipulation in every social interaction, every cultural expectation, every relationship dynamic. Jung gives you self-knowledge. Machiavelli gives you the tactics to navigate a world that doesn't want you free. This is why most therapists will never teach you Jung properly. Because a person who understands their unconscious and knows how power works, that person becomes uncontrollable. But how to do that? How to start rebuilding meaning when everything around you seems designed to distract you from your essence? Jung had an answer: the reconnection with the unconscious. Most people want to heal, but almost no one is willing to pay the price of healing. Because contrary to what common sense sells, true transformation does not begin with positive affirmations or the creation of new habits. It begins with a confrontation, a dive, a descent into the depths of one's own soul. And that is precisely what Carl Jung taught us. There is no healing without contact with the unconscious. But what is this unconscious? For Jung, it was not a mere repository of repressed memories or past traumas. It was an entire universe, vast, symbolic, that holds all the parts of us that have been forgotten, denied, abandoned. Our most authentic impulses, our deepest fears, our most painful truths. Everything you try to ignore is there, waiting. And why does this matter? Because what you do not face in the unconscious begins to govern your life without you realizing it. Jung clearly stated, "What you do not bring to consciousness returns as fate." You think you have bad luck in love, but you unconsciously repeat the same patterns. You think you are sabotaged at work, but you unconsciously fear success. You think you are a victim of the world, but you are being controlled by old traumas that you have never confronted. You swore you'd never marry someone like your father, but look at your partner. Same emotional unavailability, different face. That's not bad luck. That's your unconscious recreating the wound until you finally heal it. Jung called this repetition compulsion, fate returning until you bring it to consciousness. Here's the test. Can you name one decision in the last year that was truly yours? Not your parents' dream, not society's script, not your partner's expectation. One choice that came from your actual soul. If you can't, you're not living, you're performing. You pride yourself on being independent. But notice how you sabotage every relationship before real intimacy? That's not strength. That's your unconscious protecting the wound from childhood abandonment. You're not choosing freedom. You're repeating trauma. And you'll keep doing it until you bring it to consciousness. The unconscious is like a dark mirror. It reflects exactly who you are, not who you would like to be, and that is why it is frightening, because it shows truths that hurt, because it reveals the facade of the masks you created to survive, because it demands that you abandon the fantasy of control and embrace the reality of your inner complexity. But here lies the paradox. It is precisely in this confrontation that healing resides, because the more you deny the unconscious, the more it dominates you. The more reactive, impulsive, and fragmented you become. On the other hand, the more you integrate it, the more whole you become. Jung called this process the expansion of consciousness, and it only happens when you stop running away and start listening. So how do you actually do this? How do you stop being controlled by the unconscious? Jung gave us 3 specific tools. Active imagination. When anxiety hits, don't medicate it. Sit with it. Ask it, what are you trying to tell me? Let images arise. Let the unconscious speak in symbols. This isn't meditation. It's dialogue with the parts of yourself you've been ignoring. Dream work. Your dreams aren't random. They're messages from the unconscious in symbolic language. Keep a journal. Look for recurring symbols, that shadow figure chasing you. That's not a nightmare. It's the part of yourself demanding integration. Synchronicity. Jung called it meaningful coincidence. When the same theme keeps appearing in your life, in conversations, in what you read, in what happens to you, that's not luck. That's the unconscious trying to guide you toward what you need to face. But here's what no one tells you. These tools only work if you're willing to let the person you think you are die, and that's where most people stop. And when you begin to listen to this part, something changes. You start to see yourself more clearly, to understand your decisions, to embrace your wounds, and above all, to reclaim your power. Because as long as you do not know what inhabits you, you are a hostage of others, of the past, of expectations, of culture. But when you courageously dive into the unconscious, you begin to free yourself. This is where most people shut down, because what I'm about to tell you requires you to abandon the one thing you've been clinging to your entire life. The belief that you can heal without pain, that you can transform without loss, that you can become who you truly are without destroying who you pretended to be. Jung called this the death of the ego, and it's not a metaphor. When you start integrating the unconscious, when you confront your shadow, when you finally stop living the life others designed for you, something inside you dies. The person you were, the identity you constructed, the story you told yourself about who you are, it collapses. And that collapse feels like annihilation. It feels like you're losing your mind. It feels like everything is falling apart. But here's what Jung knew, that falling apart is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. It's the only way the authentic self can finally emerge. So if you're feeling that right now, if watching this video is making you uncomfortable, anxious, uncertain, good, that means you're ready for what comes next. Now that you understand the central role of the unconscious in your pain and transformation, one last question needs to be asked. What is preventing you from starting this journey? And I already know the answer. Fear. Fear of change. Fear of loss. Fear of admitting that the person you've been for the last 10, 20, 30 years was a performance, a lie. A survival mechanism that's now suffocating you. Most people watching this will do nothing. They'll feel inspired for 20 minutes, then return to the same numb existence. They'll tell themselves, I'll start tomorrow, or I need to think about this more, or maybe I'm not that bad. And in 5 years, they'll be in the same place. Same job they hate. Same relationships that drain them. Same emptiness that nothing fills. Except now they'll be older, more tired, more resigned to the idea that this is just how life is. Carl Jung said that the greatest privilege of life is to become who you really are, but he also knew that most people would rather die than face themselves. Because facing yourself means destroying the comfortable illusion And comfort, even painful comfort, feels safer than the unknown. So here's the confrontation. Are you actually different, or are you just another person who mistakes understanding for action? Because if you're still clinging to the belief that you can heal without pain, transform without loss, become whole without destroying who you pretended to be, then you're not ready. And this video was a waste of your time. But if something in you is screaming, "I can't do this anymore," if you're finally exhausted from the performance, if you're willing to let the false self die so the real one can emerge, then you already know what you need to do. You need to stop waiting for permission. Stop hoping someone will save you. Stop looking for the comfortable path. Jung called this the death of the ego, not a metaphor. An actual psychological death that feels like annihilation. And on the other side of that death, freedom, authenticity, power. Not the power to dominate others, the power to stop being dominated by your own unconscious patterns, by cultural conditioning, by the need for approval from people who will never understand you. That's what individuation offers. Not happiness, not peace, not comfort, but the ability to live as yourself, even when the world punishes you for it. So now I ask you, what do you need to let go of to start truly living? What is the lie you're still telling yourself? Comment below, but don't write some vague inspirational answer. Write the actual truth, the uncomfortable one, the one you're afraid to admit, because the simple act of writing it down is already a step out of numbness. It's already a gesture of confrontation with yourself. But here's what separates the people who change from the people who just consume content. There's one unconscious pattern Jung discovered that makes you sabotage yourself right before breakthrough. It's called the threshold guardian complex. And it's operating in your life right now, preventing you from crossing into the authentic life you're seeking. That's what I reveal in the next video. It's live right now. And if this one made you uncomfortable, that one will force you to choose between continuing the lie or finally facing yourself. The link is on screen. Click it. Because the people who watch that video next are the ones who actually do the work. Everyone else just collects insights and stays stuck. And I think we both know which one you are.